continuing our theme about telling us something good from the life of this church or the life of the world, and inviting some of the folks from our session to share. And today we are very happy to welcome Nancy DiTomaso to tell us a little something good about this community and about her life of faith.
Thank you for this opportunity. I started attending church when I was 6 years old, and I'm now 79, so that is 73 years ago. That obviously means that I think attending church is a good thing, but that has varied over the years. A lot has happened in the world, in churches in general, in this church, and in the church I attended growing up, and indeed in me as well, over 73 years. Most mainline churches have been like this one over that period of time, going from a large church to a small one and struggling to survive. The church I grew up in Ohio, had a different path. It was an evangelical Quaker church in the Midwest. And I must say the church was more evangelical than Quaker. It started out as a medium-sized church that transformed itself into a mega church, indeed a very evangelical, and I would say a Christian nationalist church. It is not a church I would consider attending today. I realized as I was thinking about this transformation that I have probably become more Quaker than evangelical. Over those 73 years, I've continued attending church most of the time, but there have been some key turning points that made me reevaluate whether attending church is a good thing. And after leaving home, I attended a number of different types of churches because I didn't encounter many evangelical Quaker churches outside of where I grew up. Two incidents are especially memorable to me that led me to reevaluate my relationship to the church and whether I thought it was a good thing to attend church. First, a friend of mine who had been in graduate school when I was and moved to Chicago at the same time I did, began to attend a large church that was in the process of becoming a much smaller church. Turns out that church still exists. It was part of a merger of a Congregational church and a United Methodist church, which afterwards called itself the United Church of Rogers Park. And if you go to their website, it's very appealing to me. When my friend Dan and I attended the church, had a rather moribund adult Sunday school class that was not very inspiring. The class grew to maybe about 10 regular attendees, and Dan and I organized a discussion group over a sustained period of time to trace the development of church history, the Bible, and Christian doctrine, to learn something about what was going on historically, culturally, and politically as Christianity developed. Frankly, I do not now remember, after almost 50 years, any of the details of that experience. But I remember that the experience was exceedingly impactful. Growing up in an evangelical church that continually talked about the Bible as the inspired Word of God, in which people still today use the King James Version of the Bible like a personal guidebook, I realized that made no sense historically or otherwise. What we call the Bible was not written when Jesus was alive and in his ministry. It was a compilation of documents that had been written in multiple languages over a period of time, and which various church councils had to decide what was and wasn't to be included. With no printing press, and when most people couldn't read, the Bible continued to exist because monks in monasteries copied the documents, perhaps introducing changes or errors. Furthermore, the King James Version, which became central to most Christian groups, was written in the 17th century and is not known to be the most accurate translation of the documents we now determine to be the Bible. Given this experience, it seems clear to me that frankly the fetishization of the Bible and Bible verses that seem to be evident in many evangelical churches is a wrong turn and not a good thing for the church. It also suggests to me that the kind of church that I want to attend, what I would call a good church, is not dogmatic, but rather is broadly multicultural and welcomes people with a range of understandings about what makes the church good. The second experience that was extremely impactful to me, thinking about whether I should continue to attend church, was when I moved to New Jersey. We lived in Bound Brook, and I attended the Bound Brook Presbyterian Church there. I usually sat in the balcony, as I used to do here, and one Sunday I noticed a man sitting near the front of the church with a cowboy hat on. He is not someone I had seen previously, so it seemed he was checking out the church. To my amazement, the minister, whose name I do not remember because that was at least 40 years ago, stopped his sermon, came down from the pulpit, approached this man, and asked him to take off his hat. The man did, but as you might imagine, a bit later, he walked out of the church, and as far as I know, never came back. That incident made me reevaluate whether attending church was a good thing, and indeed, I stopped attending for a while. After several months of not attending church, and after my move to Fanwood, I decided again that it was a good thing to attend church. But it underlined for me that I wanted a church to be inclusive and open to all kinds of people. To me, a church is good because it is one of the institutions that link people together in a neighborhood, build relationships, and an organization that appeals to our better angels, as Abraham Lincoln said. A church is a community organization that builds community, and to me, that is a very good thing. For a church to be non-dogmatic and inclusive, multicultural, and open does not mean that everyone should view the church the way I do. Indeed, I'm sure that is not the case. But attending church with people from different backgrounds, beliefs, religious traditions, and who maintain relationships despite differences is a good lesson for us all to learn. And this time when the U.S. and much of the world is at war, we need to learn how to get along and live together. That is one reason that over the years I've not only attended this church, but also have tried to support it financially, as well as helped with those activities that I cared most about until my time became much more constrained after my husband had a stroke. When I was able to do so, I participated in a number of activities, and I realized none of these things are what the church does today. So that's interesting. I used to participate in feeding the homeless when our church did that at Sacred Heart of Mary on Friday nights with Ann Teets and Betty Gustafson. I volunteer, and also Garth Seavey always came and spent the night there. I volunteered at the recycling center when our church did that, when the youth would come and we would earn money for various things from that experience, but that's not done anymore. I also helped out with dishwashing when our church had big meals together on china plates at one time, and agreed to be a member of the church foundation and currently of session. One of the other things I did for many years, until it fell by the wayside, was to make contributions to the foundation in honor of members of our church who helped make it what it has been over the years. I stopped doing that, and I think most other people did as well, when we got rid of the envelopes for giving, and the new website didn't provide any mechanism for making those kinds of contributions in honor of other people. So going over this, thinking about so many people who over the years have made this a good church, I went back and looked at directories starting in 1986 through 2008, because those were the ones I had available. And there have been many people who stand out to me as good people doing good things for the church and for the community. One of the surprising things, though, I learned in trying to put together such a list is that most of the people I would put on this list were in the 1986 directory. Not many had joined since then. Some, but not many. So of course there are many people still here, many of you who have been here even longer than I have been, your families before you, your spouses, your children, your parents, and so on. So we have a church that is older in terms of the membership. And that is why we need to support new families, children, the preschool, and groups that might help build the church by renewing a sense of community and what is good in a neighborhood church, not commitment to a specific doctrine or a church, and we need to have a church that is inclusive of people from all backgrounds. So I started making a list of some of these people that I remember as making just significant contributions to this church. And I'm going to miss a lot of people. I'm not going to mention all of them, but maybe it'll bring back memories for some of you. And again, I'm not necessarily going to mention your spouses or your family. But Libby Andrews, Evelyn Johnson, Marshall Palmer, Louise Anderson, Roland Beetham, John Kavickia, Barbara Cox, Lola and Jerry Fry, Pete Grambling, Gertrude Grondike, so the Grondike Fund she used to belong here, Betty Gustafson, Bob Klein, Hank Kohlenberger, Eleanor Crumps, Virginia Krause, Doris Pettibone, Shirley Pillow, Martin Poe, Virginia Garcevi, Marie Semple, Evelyn Swinson, Ann Teets, Judy Wessler, and then Elizabeth Anderson Dome, Nancy Benz, Dottie Boos, Chris Chapman, Barbara Knapp, George Zielinski, Derek von Langen, Shelley and Jonathan Gardner, Donna Zielinski, Chris and Diane Poulios, Jean Fraser, many, many people made this a good church. And it is a place I think of as a good place to come because it is increasingly a multicultural and inclusive church and one where good people continue to see this as a good place to be. Thank you.